We are continuing on our series of everyday sins, and we have been, I think this is about the 8th week we've been talking about it. And let me ask you, how many of this apply? How many of you have an issue with everyday sins? If you didn't raise your hand, you have an issue with everyday sins. And when I was thinking about this, I was going, in a lot of things, we have to be able to measure ourselves and how well we're doing in any kind of activity we're doing. So I was wondering, how do we measure our progress as humans? How do we measure ourselves as humans? And you hear a lot of times, you hear the world say, comparison and whatever, but I think we measure ourselves by other people, right? If I'm in bodybuilding, I'm going to measure myself by, who do you think? Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Because there's a standard there. He's probably the father, grandfather, and the great-grandfather of bodybuilding. So when people say, you shouldn't measure yourselves by someone else, well, that's not always true. We measure ourselves in our jobs. How do we measure ourselves in our jobs? And money and position and happiness. We measure ourselves in abilities and status. There's all kinds of measurements and standards that we have to measure ourselves by. So let me ask you as Christians, if you're a Christian today, and this applies to you only if you're a Christian, how do you measure yourself as a Christian? Again, how do you measure yourself by people? Yeah, you could say God, but really, that is the standard that we should go by, but we do measure ourselves by people, right? You open the Bible and you say, okay, Paul did this and he set some standards, or Daniel or David or Ruth, or Esther or Jesus. We do that. We measure ourselves and set the standards by other people. How many good deeds? How do we measure that? Or how often we pray, or how much we pray, or how much we read the Bible? How do we measure ourselves in that? How much we sin? How do we measure that? And I was thinking about this when I was studying. I was going, every industry that we can think of has standards, don't we? They have quality standards, they have production standards, they have customer satisfaction standards. So every industry that we can think of has standards. Why don't we in our lives? And I said we do have standards, but why aren't they standards that we set to make it above and beyond what we should be doing? In aerospace, I am in the industry of aerospace, and obviously we have very strict standards. One of those standards is called Six Sigma. Has anybody ever heard of Six Sigma? Six Sigma started in the aerospace industry, but it's within a lot of industries because of some of the principles and some of the techniques. In the context of Six Sigma, it refers to how far a given process deviates from perfection. So the goal is to achieve near perfect quality by minimizing errors to no more than 3.5 defects per million. That's the common standard. In the aerospace standard, it is minimizing that defects to 1 in a million. Basically trying for perfection. So let me give you an example. If I said, Jeff, how did you do on your prayers and devotions today? He said, man, I had a great week, David. I was 90% consistent on my devotions and prayer. Let's apply that to aerospace. How many of you have flown on a plane, commercial plane, at least once? Raise your hand. How many? More than 5 times? More than 20 times? Okay, if you're on a plane and you fly one time and everything worked out well, you could say, well, that's luck, right? But if you're on it more than 100 times, you need some consistency there, right? There are over 30,000 commercial flights a day in the USA. 30,000 a day. So let's apply Jeff's 90% success in the aerospace industry. So if I apply Jeff's 90% success in his prayer and devotions to takeoffs and landings, that would be over 3,000 flights per day that would have a problem. Could be a minor problem, could be a major problem. Okay, does that mean something if you're on one flight? Yes. Does that mean something if you fly a lot like me and you're over 100 or 200 flights? You better believe it. You go to an airline, and I'm not going to mention any airlines, but you go to an airline and say, here's your ticket, sir. welcome to our airline. We have a 95% chance of your flight being well. We have a 95% success rate. And you would think to yourself, if you haven't heard this, well, that's not too bad. But now that you've heard it, you would say, unacceptable, put me on another flight. You would say unacceptable because my loved one is on there, right? The whole concept and design of Six Sigma quality would aim, again, at fewer than 1 in a million. Think about our lives now. If that's so important, if we get on a plane and we go one place to another, think about how we apply that and apply our standards to our lives, in our Christian lives. There's a study that says we have between 6,000 and 60,000 thoughts a day. That's a lot of thoughts. Okay, so we said 30,000 flights a day. That's double those flights. That's a lot of thoughts per day, isn't it? How many of those thoughts are good and positive? How many are just benign? How many are evil? How many think of hatred? How many are bad or wrong? It says in Psalms 94:11, the Lord knows the thoughts of man. Listen to this. That they are vanity. It doesn't say that they are good, that they are probably going to be good. It says that they are vanity. So the Lord knows our thoughts. So I could probably say within that, a lot of our thoughts might be wrong. They might be about ourselves. They might be bad, right? And I understand a lot of these thoughts are fleeting. I understand a lot of the thoughts are repetitive and maybe irrelevant. I'm not going to go kill my dog because he pooped on the floor. That's just a thought, But I understand that. But what about those thoughts that are there and they're repetitive and they're there all the time? We typically act on thoughts that have to do with what? Our daily activities, our work projects, our social interactions, even habits. But what happens to the ones that we call benign, or the ones that I call benign? Basically, not so effective or maybe not much effect. And we said, that was just a benign thought. That was just a passing thought. Was it really just a benign thought? Was it really a passing thought? Bad language doesn't affect me. And some of you could say that. Bad language doesn't affect me. But what if all of a sudden, if I get in an argument and that bad word comes to my mind? I don't say it, but guess what? It's in my thoughts. It's in my mind. Something comes up. Negative talk. That doesn't affect me. I'm okay. I'm pretty secure in myself. Does it? Are you? Does it affect you? I guarantee it affects every one of us. Negative talk. Cutting people down. Just little minor cuts. You think that affects them? It affects you too, because guess what? If they say something, you're going to be thinking about it the rest of the day. Oh man, I shouldn't have said that. And that goes through your mind. Why did I say that? Why did I have to come out? Did I have to be funny in front of people? Those compliments that I get because I'm in this position, they won't affect me. Wrong again. I just saw a documentary on Johnny Manziel. Anybody remember him? Johnny quarterback? Yeah, money. He was a freshman, the only freshman in history that won the Heisman Trophy out of Texas A&M. His life was marked by constant debauchery. He was given a position of a quarterback. He was an amazing athlete, but all the praise, all the accolades, all the money and all the things coming to him behind the scenes, and that's when college players could not accept money and could not accept gifts and stuff. But he was making a couple $100,000 a month in gifts and money on the side, behind the scenes, in that documentary. And at the end of the documentary, you know what he turned out to be? Nothing. He failed out of NFL. He failed out of life. He took drugs. He basically wanted to commit suicide. But those accolades, those high praises of a guy so young, did it affect his life? You better believe it. It affected his whole life. In fact, it destroyed his life. He had a lot of success. The only guy in history as a freshman to win the Heisman, taken in the first round as a sophomore at a college. You bet it affected his life. The position that I'm in right now won't affect anything. It will affect everything if you allow it to. Job says in 20 verse 2, therefore do my thoughts cause me to answer. Listen to this now. Therefore do my thoughts cause me to answer, and for this I make haste. We do that sometimes, don't we? In our thoughts, we hastily answer something. Proverbs 23:7 says, for as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And if you don't believe that verse, then I could say you probably don't believe any of the Bible. Because if you think in your heart what you are, you're going to be that. If you think yourself as a success, you think you're going to push toward that. You're going to self-motivate yourself. But if you think that you're an unlovable person, that God will never love you or nobody else will, guess what you're going to do? You're going to pursue that in some way or another. You're going to self-destruct. So maybe those thoughts, those 6,000 to 60,000 thoughts, maybe they aren't benign. Maybe they really mean something, right? Maybe they are affecting our lives. Those thoughts turn into action and daily living. Every day, those thoughts do. And habits and these thoughts do affect you, and they twist your mind, and they put you above everything else. Like it or not, everybody deals with what I'm going to be talking about today, is pride. Everybody. I don't care if you say, I am the most humblest person in the room. There's pride. Everybody has dealt with pride. Everybody deals with pride on a regular basis. And it has to be kept in a cage. So pride, what is it? It's a feel. This is the dictionary version, explanation or meaning of it. It's a feeling of deep pleasure or satisfaction from one's own achievements. Okay, so I'd like to take that word pride, when you have pride in your work and you have pride in what you do and everything, I'd like to take that and kind of take that out of it. I'd like to say you have an appreciation, you have a satisfaction in your work. Because when we put that pride into it, all of a sudden, we're saying, you know what? We're conscious of my own dignity. That's another consciousness of one's own dignity. That's where we don't want to be. Is it right to have dignity? Is it right to have standard? Yes. But when we're conscious of that, guess what we do? We put ourselves first in every way possible. The pride that I'm talking about this morning, the unchecked pride, the evil pride, the incorrect pride, where does that come from? Well, I've written down a couple things, and you might have other ones, but it comes from a sense of superiority. Career, academics. How many of you know professors or had professors or know of professors in the media that put their status of academics above everything else? You can't speak to that. I was talking to Jonathan about Charlie Kirk. If you listened to him before, he has never been to college. He hasn't a college degree, but he's probably one of the smartest men that I know. And if you heard him speak, and the students in college, the 21 and 22-year-olds will get up at the podium and they'll say, you don't matter because you didn't go to college. You think that's pride right there in that 20-year-old or 21-year-old's mind? Of course it is. And Charlie, what he's done, he puts him in his place, basically. But sense of superiority, sense of self-importance, putting yourself there, caring for yourself more than anything. And so many of us do that sometimes, right? Hey, can you get up and help me? That's putting yourself first. Hey, can you do it? Social comparison, status, wealth, talents. We do that. That is pride. Recognition or praise. Insecurity and compensation. How many of you know or have been in this situation where you overcompensate for things because of your pride? You inflate things because of your pride. You do things because of the pride and the things in you, the insecurities in you, allow it to. Pride, again, the opposite of humble, the opposite of humility is what we're talking about here, strikes us all. In 2 Timothy 3, 1 through 2, in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of their own selves. The first thing that's on the list, right? Covetous, boasters, proud. Those things are the first on the list. It doesn't say they're gonna murder people or they're gonna steal things. No, these things, these proud moments, this pride, these things that we're talking about is first on the list. It says in verse 2, from such turn away. Should we heed scripture like that? You better believe it. Because these people don't care about anything other than themselves. They don't care about anything. And when you get to that point, and you've known some, and we see some in the news, when you get to that point, everyone around them is destroyed, not just themselves. From such, turn away. This morning, I'd like to look at a good example of what I'm talking about. I'd like to look at King Saul. If you would, please open your Bibles to 1 Samuel 18. Please open your Bibles to 1 Samuel 18. How many of you would say that King Saul had it all? No, nobody. Okay, I disagree with you. I think he had it all. I think, first of all, what was one thing that short men want to be? Tall. What is one thing tall men want to be? Taller. There's no man that says, I want to be 5'5". There's no man that says, I like being short. Every man, because of our pride maybe, we want to be tall. Paul, what does it say about King Saul? He was head and shoulders above everybody else. So when he walked in a room, he could see everybody. My sister, when she lived in Japan, she's 6'1", and when she lived in Japan, she goes, I said, so how was it? She goes, when I walked down the street, I saw a sea of black, because everybody had black hair over there. She saw over everybody. And so King Saul was already blessed with physical appearance. He was blessed with a good family. He was blessed with a lot of things. He had the life. He had it all. He really did. 1 Samuel 18, beginning in verse 6. And it came to pass as they came, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistines, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tabrets, with joy, with instruments of music. And the women answered one another as they played and said, Saul had slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Oh boy, oh boy. And Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him. And he said, they have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day forward. Later on in the verse down there it says, and it came to pass on the morrow that the evil spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house. And David played in his hand, and there was a javelin in Saul's hand. Let me tell you, King Saul could have had a big, huge impact on his kingdom. He could have had such a different path and such a huge following and such a blessing from God if he would have said, you know what? I'm so proud of you, David. I'm so proud of you that you are the warrior that you were in, that you are. I am so glad you're on my team because the ones that I missed, you killed. All around me were people, and you were there. And I had confidence in you, and you were there to do it. And you killed your 10,000s. It could have been so different, right? He could have praised him. He could have said, I am so proud of you, David. You are my right-hand man, and one day I hope to our God that you will take over this kingdom. Even though he had a son, Jonathan, and that usually was the case. But it could have been so different for King Saul. He could have acted so different. But what does his thoughts turn into? They did turn into pride. I am the king. I am everything. And they ascribe to me thousands, and this little pud over here, 10,000s? This little ruddy kid, just because he killed Goliath, he gets 10,000s? I mean, you think about that. His pride got in the way here, didn't it? And his pride not only stopped at just the pride, what did it turn into? Hatred. It turned into hatred. And what hatred turned into? Potential murder. He wanted to kill David. He wanted to kill this man who was godly. He wanted to kill this man who saved his army, killed Goliath, had the whole army go against the Philistines. He's out there day after day battling for this king. And it doesn't matter because they ascribe to me only thousands. I need to be puffed up. I'm supposed to have the praise. Why is everybody else getting the praise? Pride leads us down a path of arrogance, sense of entitlement, or disdain, or hatred for others. Pride's not just having pride in your work. Pride's having pride in yourself that leads to destruction. That's junk. That's what Saul said. That's what he thought about it. Listen, thousands are a lot. If some of us were in that army, we'd probably be, I killed one. Yes, one. I mean, thousands, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people to kill. 10,000, yes, I grant it is a lot. But you know what? There's always going to be people better than you. There's always going to be people better than you. You know, some of you guys out here are great basketball players, or some of you guys are great mechanics and great musicians. Guess what? There's somebody better than you. And there always will be. Accept it now. And do the best you can for God's sake. And if Saul would have taken that and he would have said, oh, thank you, Lord, for giving me this man. But no, turned into his demise, didn't it? Proverbs 16:18, very, very familiar verse. Pride goes before destruction. Destruction. And a haughty, in the King James, means puffed up spirit before a fall. Before a fall. Destruction and a fall. You know, and let me tell you, this is real stuff, people. These are real stories. This is not just a bunch of fluff. This is what happens when we have pride in our lives and we let it do that. Contentment, I wrote this verse that I memorized so long ago, and I need to often say, contentment with godliness is great gain. It's great gain. So what happened to Saul? In verses 10, 11, I read some of it. It's potentially murder. Potentially murder. He threw the javelin at him, right? Did it hit him? No. But it could have. Since he killed 10,000 people, he's pretty agile. He missed that sword. Hey, try it again, Saul. No, I'm sure he probably got it real quick. It's like, what in the world? This guy that I'm singing to and playing my harp for, and he's trying to throw a javelin at me. Oh, man. So let me ask you this. Do you think that javelin throw, do you think that hatred started with one thought? No. I don't think it started with one thought. It could have, but do you think it started right there? After they were singing the song? No, it didn't start right there. You might say, well, okay, David, I know you described Saul, but maybe he had a bad start. We hear that in the world, right? Oh, that kid had a bad start, and he's just acting out what he was taught. Whatever. Okay, he was saved late in life, so all his habits he had before then, he was saved at 50, so anything before 50, all those habits of cussing and smoking, you know, we're just going to overlook that because he was saved late in life. Cop out. Well, you might say he just took it for granted in a Christian home, right? We hear that too. You were born and raised in a Christian home, and you were taught differently, and they just took it for granted. I don't care what these excuses you use for Saul. You're still accountable. You're still accountable for your actions. You're still accountable to other people, and you're still accountable to God. And so was Saul. Saul was accountable to God. If you're still in Samuel, please open to Samuel 10. Let's go back. Let's see really what Saul had. 1 Samuel 10, beginning in verse 5. Let's see what he really had. After that, thou shalt come upon the hill of God, where is the garrison of the Philistines, and it shall come to pass, when thou art come thither to the city, that thou shalt meet a company of prophets coming down from the high place. And Psaltery, and go to the next verse, in 11. And the Spirit of the Lord will come upon thee. Okay, there's one thing that's pretty positive, right? And thou shalt prophesy with them. And listen to this now. And shall be turned into another man. Did he have a good beginning? He was turned into another man. So even if he was a jerk, a tall jerk, a good-looking jerk, but even if he was a jerk, he was turned into another man. Keep reading. And let it be, when these signs are come unto thee, that thou do an occasion serve thee, for God is with thee. And thou shalt go down before me to Gilgal, and behold, I will come down to thee to burn offerings and sacrifices, peace offerings. 7 days shalt thou tarry till I come and show thee what thou do. Now, next verse. And it was so that when he had turned his back to go from Samuel, God gave him what? Another heart, as the King James says. I'm not sure what the other versions say, but it says another heart. And all those signs came to pass that day. So not only was he another man, he had another heart. This boy was golden. He was set up. All he had to do was stick to the Six Sigma plan. All the tools and all the procedures were given to him. And guess what? He would be forever righteous and be successful in the Lord's eyes. But what did he do? He failed. He failed miserably. The first thing it was that, right here, Samuel said, go down and wait for me 7 days, and I will come down and I will make a sacrifice for the people. Well, Saul, because of his low confidence or something, I don't know why, because he was a new man, he had a new heart, wasn't confident enough, maybe attitude, or maybe the pride or whatever. What did he do? He didn't wait for Samuel. He made that sacrifice. His attitude. Our attitude is so important in those times of stress, in those times of pressure. You think about Peter. Peter in all his ways up and down, but I remember when he was out in the water, and he said, Lord, we have been laboring and working all night. We are tired, and we haven't caught anything. But what did he say? Nevertheless, we'll let our nets down. Nevertheless, we'll obey you. And how many times in our life we have not used that nevertheless? How many times in my life that we just go ahead and do what Saul did? You know what? I'm kind of scared. I don't know. Maybe he's going to leave me. Maybe he's not going to do the things that he promises. So I'm going to go ahead and do it myself. Because guess what? I am a good man. I'm pretty strong. I'm confident. I can go ahead and do it. Samuel came down and said, what have you done? What have you done, Saul? You messed up. This obedience was serious because it demonstrated Saul's unwillingness to follow God's commands. For Saul, instead of going back to our quality plan, instead of going back to a plan that was established for him, new man, new heart, follow the plan, follow the procedures, he again disobeyed God, and he did not kill King Agag. And he kept all the spoils, right? And he kept everything. He had so much. And I think about this, man, for the people that start out differently than him, and we can see it in the Bible, that the people, and we're going to see it in a minute here, he had it all. He had it all. There are times in our life, if you're a believer, when the Lord tells us the same thing. Go in and destroy everything that you have that doesn't please me. And what do? Okay, we'll take this and we'll take this up. Man, I can't give that up, man. I can't give King Agag up, and I can't give all the spoils up, but I'll get rid of some of this so it satisfies him. And we hold on to those things, and it corrupts us, and it destroys our life. And God comes in, and he says, I asked you to get rid of all this. I asked you to get rid of the things that boost you up and makes you proud and makes you a person that's overconfident. And I asked you to get rid of it all, and you decided not to. Just like Saul. This is what strikes me too. And we see a God as merciful and gracious, and he is. By all means, he is. But in this instance, he even says to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul? Seeing that I rejected him and reigning over Israel. Even God, the Creator, said to Samuel, why are you mourning for him anymore? I'm done. I'm done with him. That is not a position you want to be in with the Lord, is it? To say, you know what? I'm done with you. I'm done with him. Because of your pride, because of what you did, because of your hatred that stemmed from pride and all this, I'm done with you. And how many times in our life has that pride gone beyond what we can even imagine? I know it has beyond to me. I owned a business at one time, and I remember the pride got to me as a new business owner, and I fired a woman because I was under the impression that she was doing some things anyway. You know what my business did after that? It did. And I go back and I'll tell you that the day that I fired her, a lot of problems happened. Was she a good woman? Not that good. But was she probably doing her job? She was ripping me off and doing other things, so I probably should have, but I did it out of pride. And it wasn't the right thing. I didn't prayerfully consider it. I didn't do things. I did it out of pride. Samuel, why do you continue to mourn for him? So what happened to Saul? His kingdom was given to somebody else, right? Given to a man after what? God's own heart. So David went out everywhere. Saul sent him, and he behaved himself wisely. This is the beginning of David's life. Listen to this. It says again in another area, and David behaved himself wisely in all his ways. And the Lord was with him. It says it several times. The Lord was with him. He behaved himself wisely. He behaved himself wisely. He humbled himself. In the scriptures, why do you think the Lord was with him? Because he was humble. It says, I'm a poor man and lightly esteemed. How many of you have prayed that way? Well, ladies, I understand if you didn't say a poor man. But how many of you said that? I'm a poor man and lightly esteemed. No, we want to say, Lord, like the publican sometimes, I fast 3 times a day, I do these things. Who was blessed in that situation? The publican, because he smote his breast and he said, forgive me, for I'm a sinner. That's what our heart should be, and that's the way David's heart was. Here's another one. Who am I, O Lord God? And what is my house that thou hast brought me hereto? Who am I that you would love me? Who am I that you would give me this position? Who am I? And if you're not saying that, realize this, guys. You're nothing. You're nothing before the Lord. Without the Lord, you're nothing. Because of Him, and I'm going to get to this, but because of Him, we are something. But when you think you're something, when you're nothing, guess what it says? You deceive yourselves. You deceive yourselves big time, don't you? James 4:10, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and He shall lift you up. So let me ask you, what do you think God thinks of pride? Just a little bit right here. Say, you don't have to speak it out, but what do you think He thinks of pride? Proverbs 6, 16 through 19. You guys are familiar with this. I'm going to read the first part of it. These 6 things doth the Lord hate. Yea, 7 are an abomination to Him. Guess what the first one is? A proud look. A proud look. You think those things are important? You think pride and humility are important subjects in the Lord's eyes? You better believe it is. So practically, here's what the Lord, and I love this story, and this kind of really sums up our God. Turn to 2 Chronicles, please. 2 Chronicles chapter 26. Ussiah was 16 years old when he began to reign, and he would reign 52 years. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord. And he went forth and warred against the Philistines. And God made him to prosper. And he broke down walls in Gath. And you can read that story. He destroyed the Philistines and other nations. He went forth and he made wells in all kinds of cities. He made wells, and his name was spread abroad even to Egypt. This guy was a famous guy. He was strengthened by God again. He built towers. He fortified the gates of Jerusalem. He dug wells all over. He was a great warrior. He had an army of 300,000 men. He even helped invent engines in Jerusalem to shoot arrows and throw great stones. Guess how many times the word invent is used in the Bible? Once. And it's right here. Invent. And there's other words that apply to it. But he helped invent these engines that would do things. Was this guy great? This guy was amazing. And it says it again, for he was marvelously helped till he was strong. God was with him and blessed him, and he just wanted the humility. But what happened? 26:16, as Steph said. 16. But when he was strong, his heart was what? Lifted up. What is that? Pride. When he was strong, he was proud. I'm everything that this Bible says about me. That's who I am. I am great. I can do anything I need to. To his destruction. Well, let's go back to Proverbs. What does it say about pride and destruction? To his destruction. His pride. So, in this pride, he was about everything. So I'm going to go in the temple and I'm going to burn incense on my own. And the priest met him and say, what are you doing in here? You shouldn't be in here burning incense. Get out of here. And they resist him and he got angry. And at the same time he got angry with the incense, guess what happened to him? Leprosy. They could see the leprosy coming on his body. Covered completely with leprosy. And you know what it says about him? Remember Johnny Manziel? Great guy, great guy. What did he end up like? This is what it had. And Ussiah, verse 21. And Ussiah the king was a leper unto the day of his death. And dwelt in a house, being a leper, and was cut off from the house of the Lord. That's it. That's his life. If you remember anything about Ussiah, probably that he was a leper for the rest of his reign and he died. He didn't finish well, did he? Why didn't he finish well? Because of pride. Because he was lifted up. Again, like Saul, he could have had everything. The guy was an amazing leader. And he did right in the sight of the Lord. And he was 16. 16 when he became king. That's amazing. And reigned for 52 years. Probably one of the longest reigning kings if you look at him up. He could have finished like on top of the world like Saul. His pride. Pride got in the way. He boasted. He lifted himself up. It wasn't about God. It was about himself. James says, God resists He's opposed. He's against the proud. That Greek word, resist, it means to oppose, to actually oppose, to be against the proud, but gives grace to the humble. I believe God looks at humility as one of the top things we have in our life, like I said before. I believe that's one of the top things. In so much that if you would turn to 1 Kings 21, and this is how much the Lord regards humility. How much the Lord regards humility. You would think there's no world, in this world, there's no way in the world, no hope for this guy. When I say Ahab, do you guys think of negative or positive? Negative, 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 negative. Everything's negative. Turn to 1 Kings 21:16. And it came to pass, when Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, and Naboth was a man that he took the garden from, took his wife Jezebel, killed him, that Ahab rose up and went down to the vineyard. Verse 17, the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite. Rise, go down to meet King Ahab Israel, which is Samaria. Behold, he is in the vineyard of Naboth, whither he is gone down to possess it. And in verse 19, and thou shalt speak unto him, saying, thus shall the Lord, hast thou killed, said to the Lord, from the Lord, hast thou killed and also taken possession? And thou shalt speak unto him, saying, thus shall the Lord, in this place where the dogs lick the blood of Naboth, shall dogs lick thy blood, even thine. And Ahab said to Elijah, hast thou found me, O mine enemy? And the last part of that verse, because thou hast sold thyself to work evil in the sight of the Lord. Verse 21, behold, I will bring evil upon thee, and take away thy prosperity, and will cut off from Ahab him that peeth against the wall, and him that is shut up and left in Israel. Verse 22, and will make thine house like the house of Jeroboam and the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha the son of Ahijah, for the provocation wherein thou hast provoked me to anger and made Israel to sin. 23, and of Jezebel also spake the Lord, saying, the dog shall eat Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. 24, him that dieth of Ahab in the city, the dog shall eat, and him that dieth in the field shall the fowls of the air. Now, listen to this verse right here, 25. But there was none like unto Ahab, which did sell himself to work wickedness in the sight of the Lord, whom Jezebel his wife stirred up. Basically, that's saying there was nobody more evil than this guy. Nobody more evil. So, of all the people in the world, you think, all right, God, go get him. Let's go. Take him down. Take him down, Dan. Verse 26. And he did very abominably in the following idols, according to all the things that he did, and Amorites, whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. 27. And it came to pass, when Ahab heard those words, that he rent his clothes, and put sackcloth upon his flesh, and fasted, and lay in sackcloth, and went slowly. He humbled himself. 28, and the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, seest thou how Ahab humbled himself before me? Because he humbled himself before me, I will not bring the evil in his days, but in his son's days will I bring the evil upon him. Do you think the Lord regards humility? You better believe it. He resists the proud. He opposes the proud. He's against the proud. But even this evil man who did everything wrong against the Lord, he humbled himself, and God was gracious to him. What a testimony. Again, these are real stories. These are real things that have happened. David's plan was to be humble and stay humble. Psalm 131, Lord, my heart is not haughty. My eyes are lofty. My eyes are not lofty. Neither do I exercise in great matters. Psalm 16:8, I put the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand, I shall not be moved. He is only my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be moved. Everything about David was humble, 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 humble. And when I continue to say that, and when I continue to do the same things, what do you think? What word do you think of when you're doing it over and over and over and over again? How about redundancy? Redundant. That's not a positive word. If you look it up in the dictionary, it's the state of being not or no longer needed or useful. But guess what we have in the aerospace industry? Why do you think every flight takes off and lands when you're on it? Because of redundancy. And redundancy in the aerospace world is critical, because it has allowed flights that had problems in the air or landing or taking off to allow them to land safely, allow them to overcome these problems because of redundancy. For example, in the flight control systems, there's 3 independent triplex redundancy in the mechanical and the hydraulic and the electronic. In the avionics, the navigation, the communication, all that goes on, there's triple and dual redundancy in those things. So what I mean by that, if this component fails, we have another component that's operated by something else. And if this one fails, we have another component that's operated with something else. So we have electronic, and we have hydraulic, and we have electrical, we have air powered. Redundancy in our life is so important. Having a plan and sticking by that plan, and then with that plan, put the redundancy programs in place so you don't fail. Because we are going to struggle from now until we die, or when the Lord comes again. We're going to struggle, and we're going to have it. But if we stick to the plan that was given, we've seen the plan. We see you've been given a new heart. You've been given a whole new person. What is it? There's no more excuses. We cannot give any more excuses. Saul had no excuse. That's why God said, Samuel, why are you still mourning for him? I gave him everything. Cut the ties. We're done. Here's just 4 quick things. 4 quick things. Identify your area of pride. Identify the area of pride. Think about it. Write it down on the phone. Put it on your mirror. Put it in your closet. Put it in front of you, because that's going to be your struggle. What is your area of pride? Second, understand it. Understand what that pride does. Understand what that pride can mean. Understand what it did to people in the Bible. Understand what it did to people in history, and kings and presidents and everybody. Understand it. How does it affect me? And how does it affect my relationship with God? Number 3, confess it. Confess the pride before the Lord. Confess it. He knows our thoughts are far off. We already know that. He knows those things, but confess it anyway. Because guess what? He wants a humble heart. Ahab, he was going to kill and destroy. And what did Ahab do? He went away and he humbled himself and he saved him. Is there any hope for us? There's so much hope. So much hope. Confess it. And number 4, change it or control it. It's easy to say, just stop doing it, right? Just stop doing it. Well, guess what? It's very hard to stop doing it. Well, control it then. You remember the movie The Beautiful Mind? At the end of the movie, the guy asked him, he was an old man, the professor asked him, somebody asked him, he said, hey, do you still struggle with this? And he looked back and he saw all these little people that were in his life, his whole schizophrenia. And he goes, basically, he said, no, I'm not over it, but I've learned to control it, right? Basically, I've learned to control it. So change it or control it. Look for ways that others have dealt with it and to become in a different state or humble. Proverbs 16:3, commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thoughts, 60,000 thoughts, shall be established. Psalm 139, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. Know my thoughts. Psalm 94, in the multitude of my thoughts, with me they comfort and delight my soul. And Psalm 139, how precious also are thy thoughts unto me, O God. How great is some of them. Those thoughts, those things that we deal with every day. It might be bitterness. It might be my lying, pride, or whatever. We have to confess it and we have to change or control it. I only spoke about pride today, but we saw the destruction, what pride can do. And there's so many more stories, guys, in the Bible. So many more stories about pride. But look at the stories about humility. David humbled himself and became a great king. Hope this has been a help. Certainly going through my studies has been a help to me because I struggle with pride. And I confess it, and I have all my life. Maybe because of insecurities or whatever. But the Lord loves a humble person. Loves a humble heart. Humility is so important. Please remember that.